In Colombia, at least 5 people have been killed as the streets of Bogota are in chaos following the death of Javier Ordóñez. The London hearing of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's extradition from Britain to the United States was suspended Thursday over COVID-19 risk. The government of the United States announced a reduction of the number of troops in Iraq. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Laura Palmeiro. In Colombia, at least 5 people have been killed as the streets of Bogota are in chaos following the death of Javier Ordóñez, who was tasered by police officers who allegedly violated quarantine rules. In the early hours of Wednesday morning, the 46-year-old father of 2 was taken into custody but later died in hospital. Anti-police protests swept the city and riot police were dispatched as the protests became increasingly violent and spread to new areas. The government has confirmed that at least 5 people have been killed so far during the protests, which have now spread to other cities across the country. So far, there have been 4 incidents of violence reported in just 24 hours, in which 14 people were killed, bringing the total number of fatalities linked to the recent spike in violence to at least 200 deaths so far in 2020. Peruvians began the 3rd phase of the COVID-19 trial from the Chinese pharmaceutical giant Sinopharm this Wednesday. Around 20 people, including doctors, veterinarians, lawyers, psychologists, and diplomats, integrated the first group to be part of the country's COVID-19 vaccine trial. Germán Málaga, professor of the medicine at the Peruvian University Cayetano Heredia and head of the vaccine trials, said that they hope to vaccinate 3,000 people this week. Meanwhile, Peruvian health researchers have pointed out that from the first 6,000 volunteers, 2,000 will receive a virus strain from Wuhan, 2,000 from Beijing, and the remainder will receive a saline water placebo.
We've made appointments for a group of 20 people who are taking part in the process, informed consent, medical evaluation, lab evaluation, and then the vaccine. There is a period in which they need to rest so they can be aware of any contingency, mainly allergies, somewhat expected during a very short time.
We have coordination with at least 6 of the most recognized laboratories worldwide, with the most prestige in different countries. We are not only with one lab or with the technology and science of one country, but several at the same time. From all, we are going to collect vaccines and do the necessary paperwork.
President of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, has questioned the acts of police who have been protesting to demand pay rises in Buenos Aires since Monday, after officers showed up in uniform with weapons at the presidential residence, sparking tensions. The president called on the force to resolve the dispute through direct talks.
Therefore, what I want to tell you today is that we are going to look for, we are going to find, we are going to provide a solution to the province of Buenos Aires, but we are not going to accept that you continue with this form of protest. And I ask you amicably, democratically, to put aside this attitude. I won't see you in this role again. We need to see you differently.
The Brazilian Ministry of Health revalidated its contract with biopharmaceutical company AstraZeneca from the United Kingdom to produce the vaccine developed by the University of Oxford after the clinical trials of the drug against the COVID-19 were paralyzed. The contract between Fiocruz and AstraZeneca will not be altered in any way, according to authorities. In addition to the Memorandum of Understanding, the technological agreement has already been signed electronically, said the Deputy Minister of the sector, Elcio Franco. The Stats News site indicated that AstraZeneca, based in London, interrupted clinical trials at its vaccine candidate against COVID-19 on Wednesday, one of the most advanced in the world. According to the source, an unknown disease was detected in one of the volunteers participating in this process. In Brazil, the study involves 5,000 volunteers and its processing is expected.
Vaccine doses for use in his country. If the drug is proven effective, production could begin.
In Bolivia, the presidential candidate for the movement towards socialism, Luis Arce, referred to his party as a solution for those who suffer from persecution and hunger in the country.
We have the goal of winning the election because there are so many people who are suffering from hunger, who are suffering persecution. This is what the Bolivian people is dealing with today. Brothers, we are the only solution and the only way for those people to find peace.
And also in Bolivia, it was officially confirmed that interest of $1.7 million was to be paid for credit provided by the International Monetary Fund, which the Legislative Assembly had rejected because of the conditions of the organization intended to impose on the country through a devaluation. Our correspondent Freddy Morales has the story.
In April, the payment or entry of $320 million of credit was registered in official documents of the Central Bank of Bolivia without the approval of the Legislative Assembly, for which a commission of $1.7 million must be paid.
You can see in May's report that there will be an expenditure for interest and commission of approximately $1.7 million. This is something that executive has to explain because everyone knows that this credit was not approved by the Legislative Assembly through the appropriate channels and means.
The finance minister of the de facto government confirmed the payment of the credit commission, which cannot be used without legislative approval.
The resources were transferred to the country and the central bank, and obviously that has a cost of 1.077% per year. We very much regret that the Legislative Assembly of Bolivia, in an unprecedented move, does not authorize the use of this resource.
The Planning Commission of the Chamber of Deputies rejected this credit because the executive branch did not provide it with the essential document.
We have sent notes for them to argue and attach the credit contract, the Supreme Decree and the financial specifications. They did not do it. We have waited for more than a month and a half. Therefore, as they have not appeared, this credit from the International Monetary Fund has been rejected. The direct responsibility lies within the executive branch for not complying with the political constitution of the state. They have violated the constitution and have committed a crime.
The situation is complicated by the fact that the rejection of a bill in a commission determines that the issue cannot be discussed again in the next legislature. This means that millions of dollars in commissions are being paid for an illegal disbursed credit.
According to the general rules of the Chamber, a bill that is rejected in this administration is presented again in the next. There is nothing that can be done. The Planning Commission has no competence to deal with this bill.
The International Monetary Fund credit of $327 million must be paid back in just 5 years, and the condition is imposed that as soon as the current pandemic passes, the exchange rate must be made more flexible, which implies a devaluation, and the state's expenses must also be reduced, which is interpreted as massive layoffs.
Haitian Minister of Education condemned attacks on schools by people who identify themselves as students amid the riots that are shaking the country. The Minister of Education, Josué Aragenor Cadet, suggested that some hidden agendas support violence among students and regretted threats and attacks against the Frise Pierre Louis, Normalien, and Roger Anglade high schools. Since mid-August, after the beginning of a school year, professors have marched on the streets and in front of educational institutions to demand salary increases and late payments. The National Teachers Unions accused the ministry of trying to stifle the mobilizations by transferring activities activists to the departments and insisted on upholding their demands. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. To London, hearing on WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's extradition from Britain to the United States was suspended Thursday because one of the lawyers may have been exposed to the coronavirus. District Judge Vanessa Barratzer ordered the proceedings adjourning until Monday, while a lawyer representing the United States government is tested for the virus. Assange is fighting American prosecutors' attempt to get the British government to send him to the U.S. to stand trial on spying charges. United States prosecutors have indicted for 49-year-old Australian on 18 espionage and computer misuse charges over WikiLeaks' publication of secret U.S. military documents a decade ago. The charges carry a maximum sentence of 175 years in prison. Germany's disease control center reported 1,892 new cases of COVID-19 on Thursday. The total number of infections since the beginning of the pandemic is now over 250,000 cases, and 9,341 people have died, according to the center. The Robert Koch Institute said coronavirus outbreaks are being reported in various settings, especially celebrations with family and friends and at group events. The number of newly reported cases in Germany declined from about mid-March to the beginning of July. Since then, the number of cases has increased, but has stabilized over the past week, according to the center. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met with his Indian counterpart Subramanian Jaishankar in Moscow on Wednesday. Jaishankar had traveled to the Russian capital for a meeting with the foreign ministers of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to discuss the development of the strategic partnership in all areas, bilateral relations, cooperation in the framework of tensions between his two countries. Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin said on Wednesday, quote, "Trust had been eroded, with Britain in Brexit negotiations after the British government announced it was putting forward legislation that it admitted breaks international law by overriding parts of the legally binding withdrawal agreement."
Today, and I think there was genuine annoyance and anger articulated from a number of quarters. I think particularly at the statement made by the Northern Ireland Secretary yesterday to the effect that, yes, the UK were going to break international law. I think the manner in which that came across, I think, left a lot of people aghast.
In the publication of the 2020 United in Science report this Wednesday, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stressed that climate change has not stopped in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, while calling on governments to meet the goals of the 2016 Paris Agreement.
The report is a catalogue of a climate crisis that is worsening by the hour. Yes, economies slowed down because of COVID-19, but the heating of our planet has not let up. As the report shows, greenhouse gas concentrations reached new record highs in 2020. Our world remains off track, far off track, to meet the objective of the Paris Agreement to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Or we can use the recovery from COVID-19 to provide a real opportunity to put the world on a sustainable path. That is why I have called for 6
amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Protesters gathered outside Madrid's City Hall while noting a significant drop in client numbers attending clubs and restaurants since the beginning of the COVID-19 restrictions. Demonstrators pointed out that people were afraid to travel to the capital because of alarm regarding a steady spike in new coronavirus cases. Meanwhile, Spanish authorities have reimposed measures to curb the spread of the virus while ordering all nightlife premises to close by 1:30 a.m. Spanish health authorities have noted that the number of cases continues to climb, having reported over 80,000 new COVID-19 cases on Tuesday. Authorities in Czech Republic reimposed COVID-19 restrictions on Wednesday, following a steep rise in cases. Face masks will now be mandatory on all forms in public transport as well as in health facilities, shops and shopping centers and public buildings. Meanwhile, commercial establishments are subject to hygiene and social distancing requirements, and nightlife facilities are required to close from midnight until 6 a.m. in the capital, Prague. Czech authorities reported over 1,000 new COVID-19 cases this Wednesday and 444 new fatalities. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. A huge fire raged in Beirut port on Thursday, sparking alarm among Lebanese still reeling from the devastating dock site explosion that disfigured the capital last month. It was not immediately clear what caused the blaze just over a month after the August 4 blast, which killed more than 190 people, wounded thousands, and ravaged much of the capital. The interim head of port, Bassem Al-Qaisi, told Lebanese television channel LBC that the blaze started in the port's free zone, where an importer had stocked cooking oil containers and tires. The fire started with oil containers before moving into the tires, he said. It was either caused by the heat or by a mistake. It's too early to say. The government of the United States announced a reduction of the number of its troops in Iraq. A spokesman of the Iraqi Joint Operations Command, Tashin Al-Kafahi, affirmed that the U.S.-led international coalition forces will draw down the level of U.S. troops in Iraq to 3,000 by the end of September. The withdrawal came as unidentified militant groups have frequently targeted Iraqi military bases housing U.S. troops across the country, also followed by tensions since January 3rd when a U.S. drone struck a convoy at Baghdad airport, which killed Qasem Soleimani, former commander of the Quds Force of Iran's Islamic Revolution Guards Corps. A 4-month state of emergency has been declared on the Greek island of Lesbos, following a huge fire which gutted the country's largest and most notorious refugee camp. The fire on the island of 85,000 people left thousands of asylum seekers homeless. Germany used EU states to take in its camp survivors. The EU Home Affairs Commissioner said the bloc will finance the immediate transfer and accommodation of the mainland on the camp's remaining 400 unaccompanied children and teenagers. Norway on Wednesday offered to take in 50 Syrians from the camp. Over 12,000 men, women and children fled in panic into nearby olive groves and fields overnight as the fire destroyed most of the overcrowded and squalid Moria camp. This Wednesday, anti-apartheid lawyer and human rights activist George Bizos passed away at the age of 92 in South Africa. Pisas was part of the legal team that defended Nelson Mandela and other leaders of the African National Congress during the Rivonia trial that took place from 1963 to 1964. He remained active in human rights work in South Africa during the 1980s, while also taking part in the negotiations that led to South Africa's first democratic election in 1994. Meanwhile, the Southern Africa Litigation Center, where he had worked for several years, issued a statement following Bisa's passing, noting he was a shining light during the dark days of apartheid and beyond. And we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Remember to join us on social media. For TeleSUR English, I'm Laura Palmeiro. Thank you for watching.